Hey everyone, this is Brett with Indie Comics Dispatch and broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the Milky Way galaxy. This is Broadcast from the Dispatch.
If you got a story and you want the world to know it, if you think you ready and you ain't afraid to show it, throw your hands up high, yeah, we might stand out. We always representing cause that's what it's all about. We always representing cause that's what it's all about. And if you love some indie comics, let me hear you shout. Just stay tuned, what's the story? Had to get that every time a brand new indie comic from the Dispatch.
Hey Brian.
What's going on, Brett? How you doing, man?
Not much.
Long time.
Yeah, I was here last week. You ditched me, and that's
Yeah.
fine because you were with James Grandmaster Fax, Boyce,
Yeah.
and so you had probably a better time than hanging out with me. But that's fine.
You found me somehow, which is a little disappointing because I was trying to hide. But
Yeah.
you're a hound dog, so I'm back, I guess.
You're back.
Yeah.
And if you're out there watching, hopefully it means you're back too. And take a moment, share the stream, share it to groups, share it to your profile, share it to wherever you want to share it to, because it really helps people find us, find new indie creators. I said something. I've been trying to workshop something. I need a editor's help, Brian, on this. That we help fans connect with the great next title they don't know they love yet.
That was you do need an editor.
Yeah, I do, right? And so because that was painful.
I was like, what?
And so we connect fans with titles with fans, and we want you to be a part of that. And we want other people to be a part of that too. So
we want to connect you with the next great indie comics movement.
Yeah, see.
Editing.
We'll workshop it. Yours was okay. Yours was okay.
Yeah, I mean, so speaking of next great indie comics movements, I hear that you have some really good news, sir.
Do I?
I think
I do. And so I think I know what you're talking about. Hopefully we're playing off each other in the right way here. This week, we've been talking about it for a little bit back and forth, but this week, ICD locked down our first corporate sponsor. And I am super excited about Comics Wellspring joining the Indie Comics Dispatch family as a sponsor. They're our first title sponsor. That's the highest level of corporate sponsor we have right now available. And so they went all in on the Dispatch. They want to help us grow. They want to help get their word out to their fan base also about the Dispatch, but also get the word out to our fan base about Comics Wellspring. And we like them in particularly because they use the X in comics also. So they're on brand for us.
Right. Comics Wellspring are really, really great company, really great guys. I do some short print runs through Wingless Comics with them. I've always been satisfied. They're always great customer service. Again, just genuinely great people and ones that kind of pump up the community. So obviously I think that kind of thing is necessary and awesome.
Exactly.
So congratulations to both.
Yep. And it's just going to help us grow and help us keep going. And they will also be a title sponsor of the ICD Awards when we do those this fall.
Nice.
So they'll be partially presented by Comics Wellspring. So
awesome.
Super excited to have them on board. If you don't know about them, look them up, follow them. They are always giving great tips, great ideas. They have contests. In fact, last week, Dan Price was on the show, and his cover for Bigfoot Knows Karate won their cover contest because they had a cover contest.
Dope cover, man. That cover was really cool. Excellent.
And did you probably missed the story behind it. Somebody that was originally fan art. An artist just sent him that, and he was like, okay, I'm going to have to pay you for this because I want to use this as a variant cover.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah. That's dope. I had no idea.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So if you want to send Brian and I art, message us for our addresses. Everybody.
Yeah. No problem. I want to win a contest too. Jesus.
Right? But speaking of sponsors, we also have this little thing called Patreon going on. And this week, we got 3 new patrons, and I'm so excited. Right before we went on the show last week, I think Brandon DePillis, I know I'm not saying that right. I know I'm not saying it right, but Brandon became a patron. John Constant became a patron. And then this week, Thomas from Paranoid American became a patron. You can become a patron too for as little as $3, and it really helps the Dispatch. You get all sorts of great rewards and exclusive content. If you're a creator, those higher levels get you kind of guaranteed coverage of your projects, special invites to podcasts. So take a look at it at patreon.com/indie comics dispatch, patreon.com/indie comics dispatch, as little as $3 a month, not a week, a month. That's less than $1 a week. You can become a patron of the Dispatch and help us grow bigger and further.
From
Brian,
10 cents a day,
you
can help the Dispatch.
You can help starving nerds in Atlanta and LA. Actually, no, none of that money goes to us. Actually, it all because we're a 501c3. It all goes in the organization, and so we keep growing that way. Speaking of growing, let's see, how many hours do we have left? 39 hours left, Brian.
39 hours, right down to the grindstone, right? We're biting our nails. We've been doing really well. We jumped really hot out the gate for Justice Number 3's campaign. That's obviously currently still on Kickstarter right now for another, what did we just say? 39 hours?
39 hours.
39 hours. So yeah, it's been really fun. It's been a wild ride. Yeah, I cannot thank everyone who's pledged. We're still growing, which is awesome. I always like this last minute push because it's like the end of legitimately like the end of a race where you see that burst of speed from a runner or whatever. So it's always pretty fun and nerve wracking to see where it's going to end up ultimately and kind of what you can do with the community support and then the next project that you get to produce. So thank you all again. 39 more hours, lots of time, all the time in the world already. You're going to get this comic pretty quickly. It's got some dope story in there. I call it the most controversial panel in indie comics today. If you haven't seen it, it's the heroes that we know and love are in hell, man. So you got to see how they got there and what the story is behind that. So again, thank you guys. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, 39 hours. Go back at some great levels there that you can back at, some great rewards, great add-ons. So help that end strong. Before we introduce tonight's guests, I do want to mention one more thing. I mentioned Thomas from Paranoid American earlier, and let me switch this up. Thomas has a Kickstarter going on right now. I can't get it on screen, Thomas, because I just shared one thing. But I'm going to drop Thomas's link in the comment section. And he's got some really interesting stuff. I was talking a little bit about it before the show. Very paranoid American stuff, which he's true to his name. It's kind of like supernatural conspiracy theory type stuff. If you like stories like that, you're gonna love his stuff. His current title is called The Chosen One, like the name because it's about a guy named Juan. So it's The Chosen One, and it looks hilarious and good all at the same time. So be sure you check it out. Link is in the comment sections. Brian, you got anything else?
I do want to say what's up to Crimson Owl Comics, who said what's up, and Alec, who said he called Wingless the GOATs, and I appreciate that. We are definitely trying to be the greatest in our field, if nothing else.
Not trying, doing.
Hey, Yoda.
So tonight we have Ben O'Grady. He's been on the show before. We're going to welcome him back to the show. He and his teammate, I will call them, fellow artist, fellow creator, Joe Shuster. Not the creator of Superman. I'm just going to keep saying that, Joe. Sorry. I've always wanted to interview Joe Shuster, and so I finally get to. Sorry, it was a different Joe though. They took Scott Snyder's comic course. They just finished. Well, they didn't just finish, but they just finished an anthology put together by the course, and that just launched on Kickstarter today. And so we welcome Ben and Joe to the show. Oh, that rhymed. I didn't even mean to.
Hey, it's good to be back. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you. So why don't we take a minute here and just kind of Ben and Joe. Why don't Joe go first and tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you end up becoming a comic creator?
Well, I've always been a fan of comics since I was a kid, and I mean, I've always been a creative. I make music. So diving into comics was like sort of just always on my bucket list. So I saw that Scott Snyder was hosting this comic writing class, and I was like, why not? I'm going to do this, and I'm going to use everything I learned in this class and make a comic.
Ben?
Yeah. So I've been making indie comics for a couple of years now. Published one of my first indie comics in Tales from the Dispatch. And, lifelong comics reader. Like I found comics in the 80s with like Chris Claremont X-Men and New Mutants. And I started reading like the original Transformers, G.I. Joe, like all that stuff that a kid just loves. Always wanted to write. I have a master's degree in creative writing. Way back in the day, I originally thought I was going to be a prose writer, and write short stories and maybe be a novelist. That never happened. And I always kept writing. I was in the sort of like freelance sports writing world for a while. I was writing niche articles for a long time, for about 10 years. And that was fine. But at some point in the last like 4 or 5 years, I wanted to get back to what I was really passionate about, which was comics. I always had a bug to write comics. So the like tools and platforms started to really be out there and prevalent to make comics, get them out there, and do it not cheaply, but like do it much more efficiently than you could do it 20 years ago. Like 20 years ago, it was impossible to create comics. It would cost you tens of thousands of dollars. So I gave it a shot. I started making just really short comics just to try it, loved it, and then kept going. I found Scott Snyder's class. I've been reading his comic books, and then he started posting that he was hosting a class on Substack. So I joined it just like Joe. The class is fantastic. A lot of value there. And maybe the best value in the class is that you meet this huge community of other writers, right? There's dozens, if not hundreds, maybe over 1,000 creatives in the community. So you can very easily find collaborators. You can find artists. You can find fellow writers if you want to run material by. So it's helped me tremendously, right? It's kind of like really like exploded my writing in the last like year. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And that's how I got into making comics.
That's really cool. I was going to comment, but I didn't want to interrupt you. That when I think all of us here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like the idea of creating a comic or meeting somebody like Scott Snyder when we were kids and reading comic was just unfathomable. Like to make a comic, you had to have a publisher. You didn't really back then because there was indie comics back then too. But the thought was you had to have a publisher to meet someone like Scott Snyder. You maybe got an autograph from him at a convention, but even those were few and far between. And so just the way the technology and the internet has changed things is amazing. That us four people who from very different walks of life are all creators and doing our own thing. Because technology has advanced to the point that we can make our own dreams come true. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it feels like the internet has advanced all creative arts. Like any creative person, the internet is the ultimate tool.
Except for analog phone designers. They are out, but everybody else.
I don't know, man. What's old is new, bro. So it's like, it's retro now. So even them.
Well, that's
they got
true.
Their niche, man.
That's true. But you're 100% right. Like, I mean, it's because you can connect with people who help push you. If you're willing to be pushed as a creative, you can connect with people who are willing to push you and take you and help you get to that next level. Which is one reason why I choose to create with Brian, because Brian, although he annoys the shit out of me sometimes,
That's fair.
He really pushes me to the next level. You don't really annoy the shit out of me, just a little annoyed.
I annoy the shit out of myself. So I mean, it is what it is. So I was wondering, being that again we're talking about creatives, so how difficult was or wasn't it to bring a bunch of people together to create like an anthology that, even though the stories might not be the same, it's all kind of one thought process, one theme, one pattern. Again, when you're talking about people who are in a class with Scott Snyder, right? Like, so that means these are driven people, you know, in every sense of the word. So how difficult or easy was that, and what was that process like?
Well, when I first started taking the class, I immediately was like, I'm going to create my first comic here. But I'm going to butcher the quote, but like I read a quote that was like, if you want to be good at something, surround yourself with people better. So my immediate thought was, my dog's going to be in the podcast too. Excuse me. My immediate thought was little chihuahuas. My immediate thought was that I want to do like stories with other people. I want to get together and have a writing group. So I want to say it was fairly easy to get people involved. It was just like pitching it, in the big Discord. The difficult part came later, like figuring out, okay, like we have people that want to do this anthology. So like, how do we do it? That was more difficult than actually getting people. That was fairly easy. So many people were like, yeah, I want to be part of this.
Yeah, the interest and the enthusiasm to have everyone make short comics and then put it together into an anthology was maybe the easiest part, quote unquote, the easiest part. But the actual nuts and bolts and the execution of an anthology, taking it from nothing, zero to from idea all the way through to Kickstarter, to launching it on Kickstarter, which we did today, that was very difficult, I thought, because the learning curve is so steep. Very few of the creators in our group had ever done a Kickstarter before. Joe and I had never been participating in a Kickstarter other than backing. So we had to ask a lot of questions. We actually brought Drew Lenhart in, who, you guys know, and he gave like an hour and a half sort of Q&A session over Zoom. He was very generous, and we scheduled him, and he came on, and, he's done 1 million Kickstarters, and he's like a small press publisher. And we just asked him like every question you could think of, like from finances to how to set it up. How do you do the math for your campaign goals? How do you make a book? How do you print it? Who do you use for a printer? Like everything. So, that education was pretty tremendous. And that's actually like one thing that Scott doesn't teach in his class. Like he really focuses on the writing aspect, storytelling. He focuses on storytelling. But if you want to make a comic as an indie comic creator, that's what our group really like dug into. Like how do we make our first comic and get it out there and publish it as a printed product? So huge learning curve, but extremely rewarding. And you guys know it's like a tremendous amount of work.
Well, I was going to ask as part of that, like you've kind of already touched on it here, but there were so many first timers in this group who had never done anything before with actually making the comic. So what bumps did you hit along that road? What was addressed by having someone like Drew from Snowy Works come in and address everybody? But, was it tough getting this project finally off the ground with so many first timers, or did y'all just kind of bumble along together and learn and grow?
School of Hard Knocks. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I think it was a bit of School of Hard Knocks, but it's like a happy blend of people where there was some experience here and there. So like the gist was kind of understood, and just like we were, thank God, able to execute, for the stellar team that we have. I would say that so. This is my first time with all this. So my bumps in the road was like even finding an artist, I had to, everyone pooled resources to figure out that, there's those Facebook groups and the Reddits and these places where the artists are dwelling and looking for work. And so, and also even putting a cohesive story together, learning about that structure, and especially in a short span. So if we have a 6-page maximum, all these fantastic ideas you have to like really narrow it down to get it to 6 pages and to be like a good, have the flow of the ups and downs of a full story.
Yeah, I will say I continue to find that to be one of the most difficult parts of writing short comics is, we set a maximum. We were like, this is a rule, 6 pages or less. no more than that to get into this book. And I find a 6-page comic to be very difficult to write, because it's very easy to come up with enough material to write 30 or 40 pages, but then you have to edit it down to whatever really the message is, still have a beginning, middle, and end within 6 pages, tell a coherent story, have an emotional arc, because that's part of what Scott teaches. Like, he's all about the emotional component of the story first, and then the plot second. So yeah, I mean, that stuff is not easy, and to get 20 people to do that, to execute that, at a certain quality level, and then put it all together and do the book and market it and publish it. Like, it was a lot of work. I'll tell you.
Yeah, I bet.
So I wonder, I mean, obviously a huge Scott Snyder fan as well. And I also come from a similar background, being of like having an English degree. So I wonder, and that's what I wondered about the class, which is not one of the reasons I didn't go in. Honestly, I just legitimately forgot. But how was that learning curve for you? Like, you've done professional writing, you have a master's in creative writing, right? So you're learning how to write from someone while already knowing how to write of a certain fashion. So how was that? How was learning that and molding what he was teaching you to your style? How was that?
Wow, that's a great question. So I have so much experience in nonfiction writing these days because it's all in web content and sports writing. And my fiction writing is pretty like rusty. It's from, graduate school, like years and years ago. But I will say that the things that Scott teaches you, and obviously everyone knows he's a best-selling comic author. He has a dozen books out right now, that are extremely popular. Everything he's teaching you is like extremely, I think it's cutting edge, right? It's like, forget about your plot when you are making your story. The emotional component is the most important part. Map out the emotional arc of your main characters, and then you can graft whatever plot you need to that. That, for me, that was mind blowing. I had never thought of story in that way. And I took many hours of graduate classes in writing, and I never had a professor tell me that. They never said it just like that. And that was in his first class. That's class number 1.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, like, that's amazing. And I didn't really know how to do that. So that was one of my goals. Joe was talking about one of his goals was making a comic, his first comic. One of my goals was to try that process, which was make the emotional story first and not worry about the plot so much, and kind of like map the plot later. And I found it to be very difficult. It was like, it took me extra hours to sort of like wrap my head around that and just work through the writing process. In the end, I loved it. Like, I think it was amazing. Now I think it's the only way to write, but it was not easy. 'Cause like before, I'm so plot driven. It's like, okay, here's my story, plot A through Z, just get the characters there. And then I'll just drop in some emotional and character nuance here and there. But I tried to come at it from a completely different direction with this story that I have in the anthology, so yeah, it was different. I think he's cutting edge. Like, I really do, with the stuff that he's teaching. And, he brings in like the top creators in the field. Like, he had Tiny in there, Chip Zdarsky, Donny Cates, and they come in to have a discussion about one facet of writing. So it might be characterization, 3-act structure. It could be about endings. It could be about bad guys. He really gets into that kind of stuff. And he shows comics and he breaks it down like right there on the Zoom screen with you, and he's like, here's the first 5 pages of a Nightwing comic. Let's just walk through it, and like, that's great. Like, if you're really into like comics process and comics writing, like, it's good stuff. It's really good stuff.
Well, you mentioned the guests there, and I was going to ask about this, and maybe Joe, you can talk about this. Some of the various guests that Scott brought in to teach you guys. What was some of the key takeaways you remember from some of those guests that weren't Scott? And did any of them ever contradict Scott in some of his lessons that he was teaching?
I wouldn't say there was any contradictions, more like, adding on top of. Something that comes to mind would be Greg Capullo's class, which I loved. It was one of the earlier ones. Key takeaway being, again, for me, I'd never done this before, like that collaboration process with the artist who sees your words on paper and imagines it, visually. And Greg and Scott's relationship, how it evolved. And Scott talked about how it started and how they met and the project they were put on together. That was pretty eye-opening for me, and got me personally pumped to find an artist to collaborate with.
Very cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
and that was Court of Owls. That was like his first
Mhm.
Batman comic. So he had Greg on, and they talked all about Court of Owls. They really broke it down, and he showed the Court of Owls script that he wrote 12 years ago, whatever it was. And he's like, this is what it looked like on paper. This is what it looked like in the printed form. And then Greg and they would like talk about it, right? Like Greg was like, yeah, you were like trying to overscript it and here and there, and they were like, there was a lot of ball busting going on because these guys are all friends.
Mhm.
But they really dug into like the comics, and like they kind of like broke it down. It was like really interesting process.
That's really cool. Court of Owls. My son actually has that poster on his wall in his room. So as soon as I saw Greg Capullo was one of the guests, I was like, that's cool. They probably talked about that.
Yeah.
They really broke down Court of Owls.
That's so cool. That's really fun.
How much different did that script look? I'm a big script guy. Obviously, I love comics, right? But Brett knows, like, I'll read his script, and I want to read his script more than I do the finished comic, because for me, it's very visual, So how much different was the script as to what we got on the page for something like Court of Owls?
Do you want to take that one, Joe? Do you want me to?
Oh, no, sure. So actually what's interesting, that's a good question, is that when Scott wrote the original script to send to Greg, they didn't really know each other. So his script was incredibly descriptive, down to pictures, like Google Images of what he means. This is what I mean when I say this type of building, everything. And Greg basically was like, I've been in this business a long time. Like, let me do my work. Like, you don't need to send me every little detail. Give me the gist. Let me do my thing. And so they developed that relationship over time of like, basically Scott providing the bones and Greg Capullo adding all the meat.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Like when he showed us the script on the Zoom call, it was, I mean, you could see that it was a script, but there was paragraphs of text of descriptions of like each panel, almost like Marvel style, right? Where he would describe in like very detailed, like exactly what's happening, camera angles. This is what's in the scene. And then, he sent it to Greg, who he didn't know at the time. And, eventually Greg was just like, look, man, you don't need to put all this stuff in your script. Like, I got this. Like I can just do all this stuff. And so like Scott's script, from what I understand, has evolved pretty dramatically over time, right? Like he's cut back, self-edited, and, he's just allowed his collaborators to really like do their thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. It's interesting. If you're a comic, script nerd, that Brian, like, I think you would love this kind of stuff. Like he really gets into that stuff.
That's awesome. That's dope.
So one more question about the class itself. We may have more, but one more question that comes to mind before maybe we switch to the anthology a little bit more. And I do want to shout out our patrons in just a minute too, because we are almost at the halfway mark of the show. But what is, if you had to reflect on maybe the most important takeaway that you would want to share with other indie creators specifically from the class, what would it be?
For me, it was what Ben mentioned about the emotional arc. I'm also like super plot driven, not a lot of experience. So learning that forget about the plot. It's all about the emotion. That for me was the biggest takeaway I'll take.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the top of the mountain, what he was teaching. I'll try to tell one story about like a story that he was telling, or like one anecdote. So he had one example in one of the classes where he was kind of breaking down the movie Titanic, the James Cameron movie. And he said, he kind of walked through like, this is the emotional progression and the arc of the two main characters, Jack and the female lead. I can't remember her name at the moment. He's like, you can have the entire story, the emotional story of Titanic, take place not on the boat. It can be somewhere else, and none of the plot things can happen. And there's still a story there, right? There's still a romance there and a tragedy. But when you add all the Titanic plot, ship hitting an iceberg, going down, somebody dying, spoiler alert, that enhances all of those emotional moments, right? It vastly enhances it. And I had never thought of it that way, like where you can just completely take the emotional story out and separate it, and then you can put whatever plot you want to it. When he gave that example of the Titanic, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like I'd never thought of it that way, and there was like another example where he was showing some kind of Batman comic, and he was talking about, in this particular scene, I want this emotion to be conveyed. And there's like an action that happens, and the action was, I think Batman spit like kryptonite gum at Superman to make something happen. He's like, if you think about it, kryptonite bubble gum is like super stupid. That's what he said. He's like, but it doesn't matter. Like the emotion comes through in the scene. There's a weird piece of plot that happens, and you just move on, and it's comics, and it's great. Everybody loves it. So when he gave that example also, I was like, you can basically do anything. Like as long as you have the underlying emotional progression and the emotional movement, then you can put whatever plot you want onto it. You can make your story do anything.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That
was also my biggest takeaway.
I love it.
I can't believe you ruined Titanic for me.
I know, like
Right.
I was gonna say we
Didn't
do
know what was gonna
spoilers. No,
Just shut the pod down now. Just we're done.
Rose, Kate Winslet's character was Rose. For anybody out there like dying to know, it came to me all of a sudden.
Jack and Rose. That's right.
Yeah, and how dare you forget Kate Winslet?
Yeah.
I knew Kate Winslet. I loved her in Mayor of, I can't remember what the show was. A great HBO show. Great actress.
I do want to take a moment and again shout out our patrons. We have 10 patrons, and Alec Sorbello just increased his pledge. Thank you, Alec. We appreciate that. He went up a tier, and he didn't have to, but he did because he believes in Indie Comics Dispatch.
Nice.
Shout out Gyro Universe.
Yeah. Thomas from Paranoid American again, John Constant, Brandon DePillis. Brandon, you're going to have to message me and tell me how to pronounce your last name because I feel like I'm not getting it right. Celeste Cornish, Dan Schmidt, Alex Sorbello, Jason, again, I'm going to butcher your last name if I say it, Jason. Message me. Brandon Foster, Aaron Guzman, Brian Lambert, and Quentin Rushing. Thank you guys for keeping the dispatch going. Again, we also want to shout out our title sponsor, Comics Wellspring. If you're looking for merch for your Kickstarter fulfillment, comic book printing, they kind of do it all. And you can even set up an online store that they will fulfill your physical orders for you through. And people can just go there, browse a large store of all different indie comics, select multiple different indie comics, and check out all at once. It's a really cool setup, and you should check it out. All right, Brian.
So I'd like to ask, I think you can see me chomping at the bit, and I want to ask you guys before we transition into talking about the Kickstarter. For someone like myself or anybody out there who didn't join the class but is now incredibly interested in it, is there still time to join? Can we be part of the Substack? Do you have that information? Do you guys know?
Go ahead, Ben.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can join tonight, and I'm happy to plug this. I'll evangelize this class till I'm blue in the face, but you can join tonight. You can join a Substack, be a premium member. I believe it's $7 a month, or if you pay for the whole year, it's $70. So there's a little discount. Yeah. You get all of the previous class videos, which they record. So you can watch those anytime you want. He has a class tomorrow night on what not to do in comics, right? It's like the biggest mistakes you can make in comics. So you can join the class live, listen to Scott talk. You can chat questions and they'll answer the questions. I think there's 2 or 3 classes left for this round. So you only get Scott live a couple times, but you do get all the old videos. I think the value is there. You'll get into the Discord, so you can meet 1,000 collaborators if you want and connect with people. Anytime you want, you can join.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I recommend it.
Perfect time to join what not to do in comics.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Biggest mistake.
Rule 1 is going to be don't go on podcasts and talk about my class.
It's like Fight Club.
Damn it.
Yeah, you're just gonna be staring at the Zoom camera, but you know he's staring into your soul.
Yeah, and he has a live Q&A with students too, where you just go on Zoom and he just talks to you directly, right? You don't just like chat a question. Like he'll be like, "Oh, Ben, what's your question?" So he does a couple of those, occasionally. So there's a lot of like cool stuff that happens in there.
Very cool. Very cool. So you can still join. There's a couple more classes, and I'm assuming it kind of resets and it's all starts again from the beginning. In what, a few months, 3 months or so.
They haven't announced it, but we would assume the same time frame as the last one, which was end of August. Yeah. So if they do a round 2, it'll be like late summer.
Very cool. Now, we've already talked about this anthology some at the beginning, but let's dig in a little deeper here. Tales from the Cloak Room. I like the name, obviously. Tales from the Dispatch is similar. So it wins my heart immediately. I freaking love this cover. Tell me about this cover image here, because your Kickstarter image here is part of one of the covers for it. And I love this cover. So tell me about this. Tell me about the artist.
Yeah, Joe, you want to take that one?
You got this.
Okay. So the image, the artwork is from Skylar Patridge. She is a DC artist, among other books. Fantastic artist. We reached out to her and a couple of other excellent artists, sort of early in our process. And there's four editors. So me and Joe and the 2 other editors, Aubrey and Chris, we had a discussion and we said, why don't we try to get some rad cover art? Like just reach out to some people and see what we can get. All they can do is say no. So we reached out to a bunch of people. We did get some no's, but we got Skylar. We got another cover from Jesse Lonergan. He's an Eisner nominee. And so the image you're looking at here is Skylar's artwork with the logo on it. And we have 2 covers that we're offering for the book. So this is cover A, and then we have cover B, which is Jesse's. So when you go to back it, you can choose either one of the covers. There's cover number 2.
And just for if you're listening to this on the podcast, the first cover we were showing, my favorite here, is a person, hands in their pockets, walking with like maybe a leather jacket on and a hoodie underneath, but you can't see the person. It's just this rainbow translucent fog coming from the person, and it's right up my alley. It's the type of stuff I like a lot. So make sure you go check out their Kickstarter, if nothing else, just to see this artwork, but definitely to pledge also. And then the second cover is a young woman walking, and there's fish swimming around her as she walks down this city street, it looks like. So definitely go to the Kickstarter page and check that out. We'll put the link in the show notes also.
So I noticed that there are quite a few stories in this, and I know you guys limited it to 6 pages, but still 6 pages, 20 stories. It looks like here, 120 pages. That's a pretty thick book, and they look like they're pretty diverse. So, for everybody out there interested, including myself, what's the main theme, or is there a main theme or a through line for these stories, for these tales?
The main through line for the stories is simply a jacket. So Scott's publishing label, his Substack has the word jacket in it, our best jacket. And so, am I messing it up? It's our best jacket, right?
Best jacket
press. It's best jacket press. So we took that and we made the jacket our connecting theme. So really it's up to the writer to write whatever they're feeling as long as they have a jacket. And it ended up being incredibly cohesive because of that.
Nice.
I love that. That.
So for Tales of the Cloakroom, we came up, the way that we came up with the title was we brainstormed, like a list of names. Some of them were kind of crazy. Tales from the Cloakroom was the most popular, but what we did was we posted a poll in the Discord and said, here's different options. All the writers who are contributing to this, vote on it. And the one that you vote on is the most popular. That's the title we're going to go with. Right. So it was like community driven for the title, and Tales from the Cloakroom was by far the most popular.
That's really cool.
Nice.
I want to post up. Alec asked this question a little bit ago, but I was saving it because I was going to ask this question. He asked, anybody know where I can find a realism artist for something not so real? And so that kind of bleeds into my question of how did everybody find an artist on this? How did they match up with people? Was that a seamless process? I know a lot of times, I mean, Scott mentioned it working with Greg, like sometimes the process of writer and artist doesn't go as well as you would like. So talk about that a little bit, that process of how to find, where to find, and the bumps in the road.
Yeah, this one's you, Joe.
Well, originally I wanted to use an artist in Scott's class's Discord. There's a ton of artists. So I found one that I really liked, and I reached out, and they agreed to do the story for a few months. They agreed to do the story while I was writing it, and we were going back and forth. And then unfortunately, last minute, they had to cancel due to other work. So I had to scramble, and thank God found I think a dope artist on well, I posted everywhere, and this artist got back to me everywhere. So
Oh wow.
like on the Reddits that were, artists looking for work, and the Facebook groups, I just kind of posted my little synopsis, and a ton of artists reached out to me, all really talented, and I linked up with the one that I did, and I'm so happy about it. There was honestly, I don't feel like it's that tough of a process. It's just about doing the work and like reaching out and connecting with people and talking and sort of like meshing and vibing.
Yeah, for my artist, I was very fortunate with the gentleman I found. His name is Massimo, Italian artist. I was actually turned down by 3 artists, lightly turned down. It was like email or a DM, and they said, no, sorry, I'm busy, I can't do it. Something like that. But 3 artists, I really loved their work. I really was interested in working with them. They all couldn't do it. And then there was a writer in Scott's class, Adriano, who's kind of like best friends with Massimo. And so through Adriano, I found Max's portfolio, and I looked through it, and I was like, wow, this is incredible manga art. And that's what I wanted. I wanted like a manga style that was like really like cool looking and different from stuff that I had, comics like I had made before. So I just reached out to him. He said yes, and we were off to the races. He did all the line art, and he was the colorist. I've never had that experience before. Usually I have just the line artist, and then I have to hire a colorist to do the colors. But Massimo is fantastic, fantastic artist. And it was one of the best collaborations I've ever had. Like, he was just really just a total pro.
That's awesome. So, just to kind of surmise for people who may be looking for an artist, use your connections with people you already have, but then also there's groups, and I think that the Reddit groups, and you guys feel free to discuss this, the Reddit groups seem to be more hungry, the more kind of people willing to respond with you and get back with you right away are on Reddit. That's just been my luck of seeing stuff. But there's Facebook groups too, and there's some really great Facebook groups for finding an artist, and there's some really not great Facebook groups for finding artists. So make sure you again use those connections to find out which groups are best. Brian, Brian's found tons of artists throughout the years. Do you want to add anything to Alex's question about where to find an artist?
I actually think that Joe honestly had the answer that's like closest to my heart. It's just you kind of got to get out there. And I feel like when you're looking for an artist, it's not the place to like let your ego get hurt. You should always have your ego, your writer. But if somebody tells you no, that really doesn't have really much to do with you. It has more to do with the work, timing, everything else. And so you'll find what you want. But also, I've been very fortunate, as most people know, Justice has had his share of appearances now in comics. But I've been very fortunate that I found Fabio. And cultivating that relationship, once you get a good artist, that's the most important part. After you found that person that oh man, it works the way you communicate. Like you were saying, even Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, right? They had to learn how to work together. But once they did, amazing, you get an amazing comic. So I think that that's the most important part of after you find someone, cultivating that relationship, because it really shouldn't be just a one-to-one transaction. Otherwise, your comic is going to reflect that. It's going to reflect that we're just both doing it for the money. We don't really talk. We don't really communicate. They kind of gave me what I wanted, but maybe they didn't.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I try to keep in touch with the artists I've worked in the past for, just touch base. Is like, happy birthday, or hey, I love this cover that you colored that was published. Had nothing to do with me. He just posted it. So doing things like that, like in building your network and cultivating it, like you said, is extremely important. One thing I will say about finding new artists is they're often not available immediately. So if you're looking to make a comic right now that has to be like, you have a deadline in 2 months, that could be pretty tough. But always ask the artist, like, hey, what's your schedule like for the next 12 months? Like, do you have a slot open, do you think, in 6 months? And note that, because that could open a lot of doors. Like, you might be able to find an artist in 6 months who you really want to work with and just have your script ready to go then, and just kind of keep that in the back burner. I've been finding that is happening a lot more with people I want to work with.
Very cool. And I've heard it. I don't know this. And so you guys can, Ben and Brian for sure can correct this, that if you kind of plan in advance like that and kind of find an artist you want and ask to fit them in when they don't have as much work, sometimes you get a better rate too, because you're filling their gaps in their schedule.
I will say that a lot of times as writers, you're also the producer, right? You're the one fronting the money to get an artist. That's just the nature of the indie comics game. So anytime that you can work with someone, you know what I mean, and work around what they're already doing, they're always going to treat you better. So yeah, you can occasionally get better rates, but also you have to offer better rates. I've been in the situation of, hey, I'm going to be busy, and I'm like, well, I need it, now, so I'm going to offer you, an additional 25% of what your rate is in order to get it done. There are very few people that are going to turn that down if they have the skill or the ability. So I mean, there are a lot of, in my opinion, there are a lot of ways you can kind of work in and out of these confines that we have, being that for a lot of us, this, isn't our primary job, but for them, it might be. For your artist, it might be.
Sure.
There are a lot of things you can definitely, ease in and out of to really make it happen. And an artist that wants to work with you is going to make the time. And vice versa, right? Like, if you really want to work with an artist, you're going to schedule, like Ben said, you're going to schedule 6 months away. Like, I really want to work with this guy. So, hey, in 6 months, it's all a handshake, man. It really is a team effort.
Yeah. I try to err on the side of generosity when it comes to paying page rates. Like you're saying, a lot of artists, this is their primary job. I have a day job, so writing comics is not my primary job. But like, if an artist is like, hey man, this is the page rate, like, that I'm looking for, I'm like, okay, let's do it. I'll figure out the budget.
Yeah. I'm the same. I don't think that it's okay. You can choose to not pay a rate if you don't believe that the art is worth it, or you don't have it, or whatever. I don't think it's right to haggle people down. Because again, we are talking about people's livelihood. Yeah. And I, as a writer, and I've taken paid gigs, and obviously Ben, you've taken paid gigs. You don't want somebody haggling your word count down or haggling your price down as well. So if they set the rate and it's acceptable, pay it. If it's not acceptable, then it's cool. Then both you guys walk away. But I don't appreciate, and I don't think it's right when producers of any sort try to haggle an artist down so they can get that quality work and not pay that quality rate.
Right.
I think that's such a great point. And I think that's a life lesson that I've learned in my life. Like, it's not just with creative collaboration. Like a haircut. Are you going to pay a barber to give you a haircut? Are you going to be like, oh, well, I only want to pay $10. Is that barber going to give you a good haircut? I always think about that. Same with the artist. Like, if you're going to haggle an artist down there, maybe they'll say like, yeah, whatever, I'll do it. I like the story, but it's not like they're going to give their full rate effort, or even like Brian, you said, offering them more, like, hey, I got a tight deadline. I'm a firm believer in that. It's always served me well. I never haggle down because people are just not going to I wouldn't put in the effort. Would anyone, if someone haggled you down like that?
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to work with you too, like, you can be honest and be like, I'm sorry, I can't pay that rate. And they might choose to come back with, well, what rate can you pay? And then that's on them, right? And so you may still end up working with a great artist, but be honest that you can't pay their rate, that you'd love to work with them and they're worth every penny of their rate, but you just can't pay it.
It really is that there's a huge, well, I don't know if it's huge right now anymore, but there was a kind of large debate about that on TikTok. Like, what, what's your page rate versus what's your budget? Like that conversation. And in any kind of entertainment art, it's important. Okay, hey, what's your rate? Well, what's your budget? If I'm working for Jay-Z, I'm not gonna tell Jay-Z my rate is hey man, it's $25 a page. I'm like, nah, it's $3,000 per, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna all go up. And so you kind of gotta meter some of that out. And like Brett said, if you're saying like, oh hey, I can't pay that. I've had artists say, well, hey, what's your budget? Hey, my budget is this. Okay, hey, I can give you 20 pages at this rate. Can you match that? You know what I mean? So I feel like if the negotiation comes from the other side of someone who wants to work with you but still needs to make enough money to put food on their table, I feel like that's completely acceptable, and it does engender that good relationship, because maybe they're like, hey man, all right, I'm gonna take a pay cut this time, but if we make 10K on this book, can I have are we going to up the pay for the next one? That kind of, there's always some wiggle room, again, within reason, but it goes with relationships, I think, and communication.
So where do you two go from here? Scott's class is ending soon. What's next on y'all's horizon?
I'm going to keep creating. Yeah, I'm going to keep writing comics and put them out myself as best as I can, work with other collaborators, and just see where this road takes me. Ride the wave.
Love it.
Yeah, so second half of the year, I want to work on 2 different projects. I'll start with the first one, which is going to be, I think, 4-issue limited series. So there'll be standard length comics, 20 to 22 pages. It's kind of like a near future sci-fi action. We were talking so much about, emotional journeys earlier, but like the thing that I have in mind is going to be like pure action. It's like an adrenaline fiesta. Probably won't have that much emotional component to it. I'm not going to lie, but, so that I want to work on that. So, everything I've made up into this point has been short comics, 8 pages or less, 10 pages or less. I want to try my hand at like a standard length comic and like a series, and then try to pitch it around to some like kind of smaller, medium sized publishers and just take it from there. And then I also have a young adult graphic novel idea, fantasy graphic novel idea I want to work on. That will probably come after this initial, the limited series I just mentioned.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm going to pop up the Kickstarter one more time here. We've dropped the link in the chat of both Facebook and YouTube. So check that out. We'll put in the show notes of the podcast also. Take us through the Kickstarter here. And again, this I saw this piece of art earlier and loved it. It's just so cool. If you're listening on the podcast, it's reminiscent of John Cusack with the boom box over his head, but
Say anything, right?
Yeah. But he's being attacked by what I assume are zombies or aliens or something.
Yeah, it's Say Anything versus space zombies. That's the way I think about it.
Zombie aliens. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I love it. And this is a part of 3 different art prints you can get. So you can get both the cover images plus this image.
Yeah, just real quick, I do want to identify the artist on that. So that's Sebastian Perez. I believe he's located in Argentina. Amazing artist. And he's getting pretty busy. Like he's getting pretty sought after, I think. He's published in Heavy Metal and Mad Cave and Comixology and a couple other places. So his art is fantastic.
That's really cool. So that's part of a set of 3 art prints you can get as part of the campaign, and then you guys have a limited run of copies signed by Scott Snyder.
Yep.
Awesome. What level is that at?
That's our ultra premium tier, $125. So we have only 50 available. So Scott will sign it, and you have a signed anthology, 1 of 50. A bit of a collectible, I think. So $125 is kind of pricey, but so is flying to San Diego or Washington State to have them sign in person. So if you look at it that way,
fair enough, right?
If you look at it that way, it's not so bad. I'm definitely getting one of those. Like I want one of those.
That's awesome. And then you go down on the page and you can read little bits about each story that's featured in the anthology. It identifies the writer, the artist, the colorist, the letterer, all the creative team. And there's some just really cool stories here. And then again on the campaign page, you can get a preview of some of the pages, and then go down more, and eventually it goes into the team that was put together, I believe, right? Yeah, the team. There it is. You can see everything about the team that went into putting this anthology together. What else do you want people to know about this project before we wrap things up this evening?
Joe, do you want to mention like the different genres we have, different story types?
Yeah, I think the fact that it's so many genres, so many different people from so many different walks of life, unique
Mhm.
perspectives. I don't think this usually happens. This is sort of like a needle in a haystack almost of anthology, in my opinion.
Yep. So we do have artists and writers from all over the globe. You know, they're not just U.S. based, so they're all over the place. I think there's 8 different genres, so it's everything from like sci-fi, horror, western, slice of life, thriller. Like Joe's is kind of a spy thriller. There's a mech short comic if you like mechs. Who doesn't, right? So there's like really like just a lot of interesting stuff going on in there. You know, high emotional component to all the stories. That's what like, you know, the whole class is about. And, you know, we're very proud of the fact that it's a very inclusive group, very inclusive anthology. Like all the creators are from all walks of life, like Joe was saying, all over the globe. So yeah, it's you know, it's been an awesome project, and I think it's a really like special group of creatives that came together to make this thing.
You're gonna hit
Awesome.
every emotion. You're gonna laugh. You're gonna cry. You're gonna be like, oh, you know, I can't believe it. You know, it's gonna happen.
I love it. I love it. Brian, you got anything to add?
No, you know what? I'm honestly like, I'm kind of like side eyeing it because I'm like, all right, as soon as we get off here, I'm just go ahead and join this Substack. You guys
You
are
won't
great,
regret it.
and I'm looking forward to the content from the book myself, man. I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys for being here. If somebody wants to join the Substack, like Brian, they go to the Substack, and what do they search to find? I'm sure they could just search Scott Snyder, but you said also a favorite jacket. What was it?
Our best jacket, but
Our
no, you can
best
just
jacket.
search Scott Snyder. It's already
Okay.
here. I did it really
Very cool.
quickly because I'm serious about joining.
Yeah. So we have a vanity URL. So talesfromthecloakroom.com will take you to the Kickstarter if you need that to remember. Or you can go to Twitter at Cloakroom Comics, and then obviously the link will be in there. Or you can just do a Google search on Scott Snyder Kickstarter, and I'm sure it'll pop up. So we're out there.
Awesome. Very good. Well,
and I think
it looks amazing.
I think we got 3 backers while we're on the podcast, Joe. So for the 3 people who signed up live, thank you for supporting us.
We love you. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good. Well, again, guys, you can find this Kickstarter by searching Scott Snyder on Kickstarter, searching Cloak Room on Kickstarter, searching Tales from the Cloak Room. You could any combination, I assure you, will bring this up. We'll also have it in the comment section of YouTube and Facebook, and then also in the show notes on the podcast version of this broadcast. I do want to mention again at the end of the show here, we have 10 patrons right now. We would love to have 11 or 12. So you can sign up to become a patron at patreon.com/indiecomicsdispatch. That's comics with an X, just like the best way to spell it is. Again, huge shout out to our sponsor, Comics Wellspring, again, representing the X. So many indie creators wouldn't be able to do what they do without Comics Wellspring and the services they provide. If you don't know about them, look them up. They're amazing. And Brian, we'll be back in 2 weeks, June 28th. And we're still lining up guests for that show, but I think we have a hopefully pretty good idea of who that's going to be. We just have to confirm with them.
And I will also get to hate many things once I get back. Brian Hates Everything will return for a segment on why Superman is actually not a good guy nor a hero.
I'm done. I quit this podcast.
Be prepared.
Wow.
Everybody, we will see you back in 2 weeks. Joe, Ben, thank you guys so much for being here. Ben, I just do also want to give you a quick shout out. Ben's not an official member of the ICD team, but I think we need to change that soon. Ben's written several articles that always get good hits on them and are very informative for for creators. He has another one coming very soon. That's, I think, is going to be phenomenal for creators. He's also helped out a ton with our SEO, giving us tips to get Indie Comics Dispatch ranking higher. And so thank you, Ben, for all that you've poured into Indie Comics Dispatch, including some things that I don't want to say on air yet, but that we can hopefully talk about very soon. So
yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me back. I always enjoy speaking with you guys, and like ICD is like my favorite comics website. What can I say?
So you're the one. Awesome. No,
Yeah.
no, everybody, see you next week. Joe, Ben, thank you guys again. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.